Okay, good morning, colleagues and participants in today's session. Before I begin, I would just like to know if I'm audible. So please indicate with a thumbs up if I am audible. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Michaela Engelbrecht and I'm part of the Research Capacity Development Unit here at the Postgraduate School, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Today's workshop is titled Planning and Managing Fieldwork Logistics, including budgeting, travel, permissions, and safety. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or type your question in the chat. I will make sure to notify the presenter to address it. The session is recorded. Both the recordings and the presentation slides will be uploaded to our Moodle communities. Also, the recording will be on our CDMS and on our YouTube channel. A feedback survey will be sent during the session on the chat. We would like to request that you fill out this first to gain insight whether the workshop was useful and how we can improve in the future, as well as providing feedback to the facilitator for their hard work. Our facilitator for today's session is Prof. Colleen Dawns. Please allow me to read her bio. Prof. Colleen has been at the University of KwaZulu-Natal since 1994, lecturing and conducting research. Her research interests are broad and multidisciplinary. They include the conversations general biology and ecophysiology, particularly nutrition, digestive physiology, frugivory, and terminal biology of terrestrial vertebrates in unpredictable environments. Prof. Colleen is passionate about the science education with a particular focus on addressing problems experienced by biology students. She has contributed to the development of research capacity, particularly at both undergraduate and graduate levels. Thank you so much, Prof. Before I give you the floor, I'd just like to know, do you prefer taking questions during the session or after the session?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Perhaps I'll stop at certain sections afterwards, and then people can answer whether they've got any queries as we go. But I wouldn't mind if people could make notes, perhaps, of questions, and we deal with them. Because, yeah, but if you really got a pressing question, that's fine. Because I would prefer to be interactive. And can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can, Prof.
Thanks.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. And this is where it requires my techno. Sorry, I'm just pressing slideshow. Is it up on your screen?
Yes, Prof, we can see it.
And it's not in, it's in presenter mode. Can I check?
Yes, yes, Prof.
Thanks. Oh, don't know what I did there. Sorry. Can you still see it on the screen?
No, Prof. I can't see it no more.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. Sorry. Am I?
Yes, Prof. Now we can see it.
Okay, great. So thank you for that introduction. You've given me quite a broad, complicated thing to speak about. but it's something that I'm quite passionate about, given that I'm supervising about 25 postgrads, and many of these do field work. So I won't be able to cover everything, and I'll try and do some of it. And when we talk about field work, there are various kinds of field work. Some of you will do day trips where you just go out for the day. Others will have extended trips where perhaps you need accommodation. Others of you will do work occasionally, whereas others regular, like monthly. Some field trips, there's just a couple of you. Others, there's a large group. And then others are in South Africa or other parts of Africa, or perhaps overseas. And for all of these different categories, you then have different logistics to address. So I'm going to try in this to share some of the things I've learned over the years. But I'm based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Pietermaritzburg. And what I do know that even in our university, different departments or disciplines have different systems or protocols that they work within for field trips. And for you, Jay, and whatever department you're in, that can vary. You'll find that I do have some repetition, but it's really to emphasize usually the importance of something. So planning, 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 yes. You cannot leave field trips to the last moment. You've got to think well in advance. There are things that as you go along planning suddenly become important. And if you're someone who doesn't normally make lists, start making them either in Excel or on paper. Yeah, lists so you can tick off what you've done. Usually a very good field trip is one where there's been good planning and everything has been sorted out prior. And in terms of field trips, what is the planning? Where are you going? Why, when, who's going with you? What are you going to be doing? How are you going to be doing it? All of this becomes really important because you can't just focus on one of those elements. So the whole thing, you can't just do the doing, you've got to do the planning. And then when you come to implementing, you might find you have to improve on your plans and adjust them accordingly. Because maybe you didn't plan that the weather would change and it gets freezing cold or it's pouring with rain. So I'm not sure if I'm speaking to people only in environmental or biological sciences, but I need to say that my is focused more on biological and environmental sciences. But even if you're in other disciplines like maths or maybe humanities, a lot of the things should be the same. And the first is obtaining permits. We often need permits within our provinces, or if you're going into another country, as well as ethics. So at our university, we need animal ethics if we're taking samples from animals. We don't need ethics to just watch animals, but some universities do. And then we definitely need humanities ethics if we're interviewing people and collecting data from people. And for our questionnaire data, we're not allowed to interview people under 18 years. And the questionnaire has to have been accepted by the humanities ethics before you can go on your field trip and collect data. And I can't emphasize how long in advance you often need to do that, because sometimes just with the admin at your university, these, or in some of the government departments, getting permits and ethics, it takes much, much longer than you anticipated. It also depends where you're going to. Are you going to private land where you need the owner's permission? Are you going to protected areas where usually you also need permits, sometimes ethics, as well as other permission? Or are you just going on a road trip? If you're a botanist, maybe trying to find mistletoes, you might do a road trip. There are other types of field trip, like going to a conference where you collect data along the way. So depending on which of those, you're going to have to adjust things accordingly. If you're working with other stakeholders, especially landowners, then you need to reach out to them and get their permission. And also, often these people are so valuable in terms of their local knowledge, like safety. They can inform you about what to bring, etc., for certain types of research. And this permission is also important for your own safety. Whenever you're going onto someone else's land, let either the owners, managers, or rangers know where you'll be, because especially on nature reserves or protected areas, there's a lot of poaching, and you don't want to be treated as if you're someone who shouldn't be there. And especially if you're doing night work, you need to get permission from the managers and rangers so they know exactly where you'll be. The local knowledge is really important because it helps you in terms of safety, often finding the place where you need to collect data, and all helps with data collection. What we're finding increasingly are that a lot of the public are really good citizen scientists, and they like to assist, and they've often got incredible natural history knowledge. So build on that where you can. The other thing about working with stakeholders is you need to be careful that they know about your research and what their expectations are of your research, both in what you're going to be doing and in the outputs. Some people, just because you've collected data with them, maybe one sample, they want to be an author on a paper, and they don't know about journal publishing, where, like for us, we usually go with the +1 guidelines, where you need to have at least done 2 or 3 of at least 5 things to be an author. And rather that you'll credit them in acknowledgements. And then again, communicate. You need to tell them when you're coming, what dates, what time you're going to arrive. Does it fit in with them? And very importantly, and I keep saying this to my postgrads, doing masters or PhD is like doing a job. You've got to be professional. You've got to treat it as a job. Often, if you've done a BCom, you can go into industry and apply what you've learned. But in the sciences, we often do masters and PhD. And one of the criticisms of foreign people working in our country, but we can do that as well, is helicopter science, where we don't actually give credit to the people who've been involved with our research. And that's another talk on writing and acknowledgements. So I'm not going to go into detail on that. So if you know where you're going to, how you're going to get there, I'm not going into booking airplanes, flights, or anything. I'm going to stick in this presentation mainly about vehicle booking, because that's what most of my postgrads do. We're fortunate that we have 5 vehicles in our research lab. But in our discipline, we also have vehicles that students can hire, but they all are costly, and there's a lot of people wanting to use them. So first of all, most importantly, always check with your supervisor which vehicles you can book and can you book for such and such time. If it's going to be a long field trip, you definitely need to sometimes get permission, because some departmental vehicles, they'll only let you take for a maximum of 2 weeks. If you're someone who's got to do monthly field work, going to one site regularly or several sites, maybe and your supervisor will allow you to book, say, the first week of every month. But you need, I think, to check with them. It's an issue that often causes friction with other postgrads that need vehicles as well. And perhaps they haven't decided to get the vehicle and book it in advance. And then they suddenly saying to you, oh, but you have it all the time. But you went ahead and got permission to book regularly and you're doing your field work. So it can be an area of conflict, and you need to try and reduce that. Also, many of our postgrads don't have their own vehicles. Some of them have only recently got their driver's license. Many don't know how to use 4x4s or big buckies. So the question is, is it a group of you that are going on a field trip, and who will be doing the driving? Because if it's a long distance, you need several drivers, and our university has a bunch of forms that we need to complete if anyone's going to be using the vehicles. That's partly for insurance, but also they have some rules about how long you need to have had a driver's license. And that sometimes causes problems if someone only got their driver's license in honors and now is doing masters and needs to do field research. Sometimes we forget to check our licenses are up to date and not about to expire, because our admin people won't allow you to book a vehicle if your license is about to expire. So those are all just general issues. I'm now going to show you one of the documents that our school has, and anyone that wants to use a vehicle has to sign off on this. So there's the first 5 things are fairly straightforward and maybe more university specific, and it's more if you're taking a vehicle from the discipline. But the last point, the person who signs for the vehicle is responsible for that vehicle and may not lend it to anyone else to drive the vehicle. So if you're going on a long trip, then you need to sort it out with the technicians that there'll be more than one driver, and have they completed this form as well. Number 6 is a very important one. No private use of any kind is permitted. And so there are different issues around that. And then try and keep vehicles on reasonable roads. Bundu bashing isn't acceptable. We've had many sums of research vehicles damaged when people have just driven across quite a long grass area and not realized there are rocks there that have then damaged the underneath. And it's like 100,000 Rand later. Then there's certain issues, and again, it depends on the university. Who's going to cover the insurance? Does the supervisor, or will you be liable if the vehicle's damaged? Are you going to repair it, or is your supervisor? Because many people just jump in the vehicles and take off in them, not taking into account these things. Locking up vehicles, very importantly. If it was your own car, you would look after it. Number 11 is one I want to really emphasize. You cannot have drunken alcohol just before driving or while driving. At our university, you'll be banned from using vehicles if found with that. Most of the vehicles have logbooks in them where you have to fill out stuff. Most of the vehicles also have autocards. The problem is some of the autocards don't cover spares, and so you need to find out about that beforehand. Another one that's important is 14. All the drivers are responsible for the traffic fines. Our university will not pay traffic fines, but there's a penalty as well. Our technical staff don't let repeat offenders use vehicles for 3 months if they've received several, and that can have implications for their data collection. I'm not going to go through most of the rest, except 19 vehicles must be returned clean and good, all garbage got rid of, but that can be even a hire car. You need to return it as clean as possible. Make certain you know about procedures for vehicle breakdowns or accidents, first aid kits, but I'll talk to that a little bit more detail shortly. So again, depending on your university, what is the procedure if the vehicle breaks down, and who do you contact? And is it safe to stop where you've broken down? We once had a student that carried on driving and blew up an engine, but they didn't feel safe stopping where they were. So it's a catch-22 situation. In our university, if you're going on a field trip, you have to fill in a field trip form in advance and send it not only to our technical people, but also we've got Netcare, risk management team need to know where you are. But this is really important because if you're in an accident or get bitten by a snake, then they might send in a helicopter if necessary. So if you've been in a really bad accident and you need to be lifted out or been bitten, so if you haven't done a field trip form, then the university can't assist you. So we had someone break a leg down the Wild Coast. They were stuck in the forest, but the university couldn't help because the person hadn't done a field trip form. It's just an easy thing to do. And then our students have to say that they abide with these rules. And I'm sure most universities have similar rules. So I'm sorry if I bored you with those, but I just want to go through it with you. because I run a big lab and I have several vehicles, we have an online booking sheet, but people cannot just book. They need to check with me which vehicle, and again, rather doing it in advance and not expect that the others will just have to drop everything to allow them to go on a field trip. So again, that comes to booking in advance. I mentioned the field trip earlier on and the importance for insurance and ambulance or a helicopter if there is an accident. And it also lets our security people and the medical people know how many people perhaps are in a vehicle. Say there's been an accident and the vehicle's rolled and they can only find 2 people. You don't want them to find another person a day later and they've since died because of their injuries. So again, I emphasize the importance of field trip forms. And if your university hasn't got them, I would definitely instigate getting it as a backup. On our lab form, we also have protocols like booking guidelines, accident, field trip form, etc. So we recently had a student, he was dropping off another student at the airport, and a lady in a very posh car in front of him just reversed into him. And her bodyguard got out and he gave the student his details and not the actual driver, the woman who had been driving. Then it makes it very difficult to claim insurance. So you must make sure if you are in an accident, especially if the other person bashes you, that you get the driver's ID, copy their ID, make sure you've got a picture of the disc on the windscreen, as well as make sure you've got the correct telephone number, because sometimes if people are in the wrong, they'll give you the wrong number. You also need to go to the local police station and report it. So if you have an accident in Durban, they don't want you to report it in Pietermaritzburg. You have to do it in Durban. But it's also very important that you let your supervisor know, because there's a whole lot of insurance outcomes that need to be done. You've got to do a motor accident claim form, etc. But again, this protocol varies between universities, and so I'm not going to go into detail on it, but just to make you aware of some of the problems. What's really worrying is when all of you in the vehicle have been injured and have had to be taken away in an ambulance. Somehow we need to make sure the fuel card and the keys are returned to the university or the supervisor. So that's why if the accident is quite close to the university, it's very good to get someone from the university to get there as soon as possible. Also, some universities are fussy about which tow trucks you use. And I'm sure you've seen on the highways when there's an accident, the tow truck drivers are like vultures that descend down. And yeah, it affects whether the university or your supervisor will pay for the towing if you haven't followed procedure of which tow companies are legit, etc. It's a little bit different if you're hiring a vehicle and whether how your supervisor is going to pay for that. So they're going to have to give consent. We still have to do field trip forms, even if we're hiring vehicles from outside companies. And there's a whole lot of information that our technical staff need to proceed with hiring a vehicle. And is this vehicle going to be suitable for your type of field work? Are you going to be on dirt roads where you need clearance? And does it have enough power to get up the hills if you're doing work in the Berg? Obviously, 4x4s would be the preferred vehicles sometimes, but they're costly. And so often you can use a sedan or truck with high clearance. But for a lot of our field work, we take a lot of equipment with. So we do need usually a double cab with space in the back. But again, it depends on which type of field work you're doing. If you're taking one of the lab research vehicles, especially on a long trip, or one of the department ones, check if they've had a recent service, because you don't want to get halfway and find that it's due for a service. And a lot of these modern cars now give you a lot of gears if you've gone over the service time. If you're crossing borders, even into Lesotho or perhaps into one of the SADC countries, have you got permission that you need the documentation to take that vehicle across borders, and have you put the ZA stickers on? So one of the problems of going into a neighboring country is a lot of the auto cards don't work. So you need to take money or have money to pay for petrol. But very importantly, whether you're doing a local field trip or a faraway one or to another country, whenever you get a vehicle, one of the golden rules in my lab is you have to take pictures of the vehicle when you get it, because sometimes someone's been bumped in a supermarket parking lot or somewhere, but there's damage on the vehicle, and then they say you did it when you didn't. So the pictures really help. And even for hire vehicles, I would always do that as well. Check the license disc, is it up to date? And then, especially I find people who don't have cars often forget to check, is there a jack? Is the spare wheel okay, and is it pumped? Do you have triangles? Because Mozambique, they will fine you if you don't have some of these things in the car with you. And then it's, especially if you're doing environmental, biological field work, it's really worth keeping duct tape, sterile gloves, and a torch and cable ties in your cubby hole. Duct tape can fix anything. But if you are in an accident, you can even use it as a plaster to hold over a wound. If you're having to maybe pull people out of an accident, sterile gloves are useful. And if you break down, obviously the torch is useful. So those things are not only useful for when you're driving, it might be while you're doing field work as well. Most of our research vehicles, and I think most hired vehicles, do have trackers, but it's very good to let your supervisor know where you are and when you've arrived, because you all end up being like surrogate children to us, well, for me. And yeah, just given how some people drive on our roads, and also just if you're in a fancy 4x4, there's a chance that you can get hijacked. So your safety is a concern. Another idea is to make a WhatsApp group of those of you traveling and include the supervisors so they know what's happening. On any field trip, it's best to have 2 or more of you, because just for safety. So sometimes I get other postgrads to go on field trips because it's a way they learn more about techniques and also learn the ropes of doing field work. Sometimes we have interns who volunteer or volunteers, but preferably not to go alone on any field trip. There are a few instances where that is an exception, but for safety, I would always say 2 or more. Also good to have photocopies somewhere of important documents. We've had students be robbed, even at petrol stations. Umtata's got a really bad name for that, where people open the back of vehicles while you're getting a coffee or something like that. They pinch laptops, some of the equipment. So make sure you have important information with you somewhere else, say in the cubby hole or somewhere. So really make sure that the canopy, if you've got one, locks. Equipment's expensive. It takes a long time, often to replace. And if you haven't locked it, you're not covered by insurance either. And something that I often am asked by postgrads is sometimes their home is en route to the field site and there isn't a major detour. So they check with me, can they stop there briefly, sometimes to drop off some groceries with their grandmother or mother, especially in rural parts of KZN or Transkei. And if it is on the route without a major detour, I normally allow that. But definitely not to entertain all your cousins and take them on a ride about and out at night. That's not on. So, it's a privilege to be allowed to do that, and don't abuse it. So that brings me to the legal and financial and other obligations or repercussions of using vehicles, research vehicles, is if you are in accidents, if you are driving badly, because most of the vehicles have got signage on and you can be reported to your university. One of my contemporaries, when I was a postgraduate, accidentally killed a pedestrian at night. But there would be repercussions if you were in an accident and the students who were with you got killed, but you weren't. You would probably have a homicide case open against you. So there's big legal costs. We once had a student that took the vehicle, and from the tracker, we were able to see he visited all the local shebeens, all the local hall houses, if I can call that. And then he rolled the vehicle. This led to his exclusion from the university. So his PhD was terminated. So there really are consequences to misusing vehicles. And a lot of our universities rely on vehicle sponsorship. I'm fortunate to get sponsored by Ford Wildlife. And if it was in the press, that one of our students got killed, it's likely that they would pull the sponsorship. So we'd lose a research vehicle. And there are many others in our lab that then lose out on the opportunity to use a vehicle. So it really is a privilege to use a research vehicle and have opportunities for fieldwork, because they're costly, and it's one of my biggest expenses is travel for fieldwork. So again, be professional about it, and you have to take responsibility. I had one student that in a parking lot accidentally pushed on the accelerator instead of the brake and just overrid all the stop things and reversed into a wall. It's fortunate no one was walking behind him when he did that. So accidents do happen, and you need to be cautious. The other thing is, if you're going for a couple of days or weeks, you need accommodation, and fancy accommodation definitely doesn't equal functional. As a supervisor, I always want the cheapest accommodation, because other than vehicles, the accommodation is one of the other big costs. But sometimes you need extra facilities, and often our field sites don't have accommodation or camping available. So you don't want to have to drive miles away if you have to be there at sunrise to sunset. Are you going to then have to in summer wake up at 2 a.m. to drive an hour to get to your field site when petrol's so expensive? So also, if you're going to start surveys at a certain time, you need to take what type of accommodation and where it is into account. So fortunately, some areas where you go to do field trips, accommodation is provided, sometimes for free, but usually there is a cost. Do you have to book and pay for the accommodation or camping? And what is your university protocol? You need to book in advance, remembering that in school holidays, prices increase, and so does availability. And especially if a lot of my students do summer winter sampling, that then becomes an issue. And then if you're going to camp, or even if you're staying in accommodation, do they provide kitchen equipment, or do you need to take tents, etc. with? It's all should be considered as part of your lists in terms of getting all your equipment together. Another important thing is there safe parking for the research vehicle? Say you're going to be going to a museum to collect data there. We've had a research vehicle when the students came out in the morning, all the tires were gone and it was up on bricks. Luckily, the vehicle didn't go, but tires are expensive. And so you need to be aware of where you park the vehicle. Around the Giussini area, we often have to leave the bonnet open because rats and mice get in and eat the plastic. And then you break down shortly after heading off, or maybe the vehicle won't start. Do you need a space for a lab? And what chemicals will you be working with? Because you need to take that into account. Can you just use the veranda where you're staying, or are you going to set up a special tent just to be your temporary lab while in the field? And then, especially for biology, often we need to freeze specimens. Are we going to take a portable freezer? Will it be big enough? Where will we be able to plug it in, etc.? So those are other issues for you to consider. Food for a field trip is usually lower down in terms of the cost for a supervisor. I prefer us getting self-catering places, or if we're camping, we're self-catering anyway. You need to do nutritious meals because often you're having to walk long distance, do heavy work. And then also with the group that's going with you, have you worked out who's got allergies? If you're going to remote areas for a long time, dry food and tins are good, but you do need some veggies. And can you buy those nearby? Do you need to take drinking water, or can you just take water purifying tablets? Though those often make the water taste really not great. It's worth working out a menu and a shopping list, and carbs and proteins are important in the diet. And depending on how long you're there, some things might not last, and especially if you don't have a fridge. I try and emphasize that whatever rubbish or refuse you create, rather put it in garbage bags. And if there isn't a facility on your site, rather bring it back to campus and we put it in the garbage here. And then I think I covered earlier, do you need cooler boxes or portable fridge? I asked some of my students also, and this was one slide that one of them shared, what they thought. And again, eat proper meals, but you need field snacks, especially if you're out for long times. Have some celebration meals, maybe at the end of the week. How are you going to celebrate? I'd already mentioned food allergies, but some people have dietary restrictions as well. Where do you need to purchase your food? Are grocery stores easily accessible? What storage facilities? So there's a bit of repetition there, but I thought it important to emphasize this. Then I wasn't sure whether to put the budget right at the beginning because before you get vehicles, accommodation, and food, you need a fieldwork budget. But I decided to put it way down here because just to make you aware that us supervisors are often struggling to find money for field trips, and we want the cost to be as low as possible. And in some universities, you have to get an advance for your expenses, and I would give at least a month in advance of your field trip, especially if it's a long one. Try and stick to budget because you need to present all the slips when you get back of proof how you spent money. And then it's also worth having some emergency funds. And the problem with a lot of postgrads, they often get their grants or bursaries late in the year. Well, ours this year have been shockingly late. And they don't have much of their own cash. So sometimes an advance is worthwhile. Try and budget more than you expect, but you can reduce costs, staying in cheaper accommodation. Don't eat out for every meal. Take pad course instead of maybe going into Wimpy every time you stop. But if you limited by time, sometimes you have to eat en route. at somewhere that might not be that cheap, but avoid pies, because then people often end up with runny tummies. Yeah, so this, the other thing that a student who shared this was what they thought was important was being fair and open about the budget. If the others don't know about the costs and how much you're really tightly bound, they might want you to buy fancy steaks and lots of extra snacks, etc. So be open about it. It can be an area of conflict, especially if you're vegan and they are a carnivorous person, and they feel you spending a lot of money on food that suits you, but not thinking of them, etc. Yeah. So a lot of this is perhaps repetition. Preparing for field work, I was saying the planning is important. So you are prepared, you've booked your accommodation, you've got your vehicles, and you've pulled together all the equipment, you've signed it out, but check that it's all working. It's nothing like getting somewhere in the bush and whatever you borrowed isn't working. Some people use the acronym LEAF: learn, equipment, accommodation, food, vehicles. Have you sorted all those out? And especially with the vehicles, do you know how to drive 4x4? Do you need to take a 4x4 course, especially if it's rainy season and you're going to get stuck in the mud? A lot of these modern vehicles have all these fancy dashboard symbols, and if you don't take notice of them, you're going to damage the vehicle. Do you know all about them? Do you know who to contact, etc.? Just going to touch briefly on equipment because it varies very much according to whether you're working in rivers and grasslands and forests. What kind of data are you collecting? Is it more ecological, physiological? Are you going to be catching animals, etc.? So you should have made a list of the equipment you need. So next week, we're going to be catching some vervet monkeys and putting transmitters on them. So the students have had to work out a list of what they need, not only to catch and work with the veterinarian, but what samples while they're putting on the transmitters. So that's just an example. For your data collection, is there an app you can use, or are you going to be writing it all down? How are you going to make backups? Clothes are equipment. Think about that. You're not going to be walking in high-heeled shoes in the bush. You need practical stuff. Have you got raincoats or sun hats? With the vehicle, I've gone through most of it, but check again for damage and the service dates. And more, you're needing water bottles. Make sure you've got that. You don't want people getting dehydrated while they're out in the field, but you also need water that you can drink. So the same way I talked about vehicle equipment or using vehicles, there are financial and other repercussions if you misuse equipment, if you don't take care of it, if you don't return it as you've received it, their costs. And if equipment's got to be bought again or sent to be repaired, it affects your data collection, because especially if you're doing monthly data collection, or if you're sharing the equipment, someone else can't collect data. So the consequences, including the costs, the delays, it impacts your fellow postgrads, and it can make you really unpopular. If you get a reputation rather, of being someone who doesn't care for equipment, nobody's going to want to lend it to you. So be careful. And again, it's a privilege to use research equipment. So treat it as if it was your own, especially things like binoculars, electronic equipment. They're really costly. And it's a privilege to have the opportunity to do field work. I'm quite jealous of my postgrads because I tend to be the one now that sits behind the desk trying to find the money so that they can do the fantastic field work. But field work isn't easy, and it's not as glamorous always as people think it is. So just going back and going over some things, know about your institution's fieldwork protocols. I've gone through that. Do you have to do a field trip form? And then also, what are the requirements for your field site? Is it in a protected area where you need a ranger with you? Who do you have to inform where you are? If there's an emergency, where's the closest hospital? If you've got safety concerns, where's the local police? And in many areas, we've got also local safety type people. Like in our areas, we've got Magnum, ATI, a whole range of those companies that do security, and they often are sitting at junctions or whatever. If someone's been following you and you're worried that they're about to hijack you, do you know what you can do in such a situation? Where should you go, etc.? Because it can be quite scary. If someone's very injured, where are you going to get them to so that they receive the right care? So again, a recap about vehicles, doing checks on them while you're going, knowing about the vehicle, knowing your driving limitations. If someone in your group is better at driving 4x4 and you're going through mud, let them drive. Treat vehicles like you rented them because it's costly if you damage them. Fix the minor vehicle issues while they're minor, and especially if you're taking lots of equipment, etc. Packing style is key because you don't want to have to unpack the whole vehicle each time just to get one piece of equipment that you've put right up the front, for example. I'm just going to go over safety again. Know your contact numbers for local help. Check cell phone signal and have contingency plans. In some areas, you might actually have to take a satellite phone with, use a buddy system, very definitely have a first aid kit with basics. Watch out for snakes and scorpions when you're lifting equipment, putting out sleeping bags, shake them out. All things when you're walking in the field, be alert. And then medical requirements. Do you need any shots before traveling? So if you're going to other parts of Africa, you often need a yellow fever. But if you're doing field work where you might get scratched by a fence, then you should have a tetanus jab. And when last did you have it? So that you might need a booster shot. Rabies, we used to always say if you're working with animals, get your rabies vaccinations. But often now in rural areas, a stray dog might come up and bite you. then you either need to get to a hospital if the people can't give you the certificate. So it's better perhaps to have rabies jabs before such field trips. Ticks are also a big problem. We've had students hospitalized when they've had really bad tick bite fever. Usually you acquire some immunity over time, but it's good to wear clothes where you reduce being bitten, like long pants, perhaps use sprays to stop ticks coming onto you. Leeches are another thing if you're working in rivers where they might bite you. Are you going into a malaria area? What precautions? I usually advise against taking tablets and rather trying to prevent getting bitten. So long sleeve shirts and pants in the evenings, mosquito nets, lotions, but you need to know the symptoms and get someone to a doctor if you think they've got malaria. The one we sometimes forget about is bilharzia, especially if you're going to be going and collecting water, either for drinking or research at rivers or dams. You can easily get bilharzia. Our two daughters are keen paddlers, and we actually make them take bilharzia medication once a year because they've picked it up previously and you don't quite get rid of it. And it can really make you feel tired and run down. So just be careful of that. And we mentioned first aid box earlier on, but have you got one? And I would put extras if you're going on a long trip, like perhaps some tablets for, like if you're going to get flu. There's nothing like being really sick on a field trip. And yeah, just take caution. Safety, we've mentioned before, but if you're the field trip leader, you're in charge, you're responsible. And so, yeah, you need to try and avoid dangerous situations. And that's difficult in South Africa. So know your team's limitations also, especially if you're going to be walking and you get lost and you're out in the bush for a long, long time. Make sure you've got backup water, snacks, etc. Do you have a torch or headlamps for walking back in the dark, especially if you've had a puncture somewhere? No data is worth risking someone's safety. Always err on the side of caution. Recharge batteries each evening, but plan a day off where you recharge your personal batteries. People get tired doing physical work. Um, and those day offs, sometimes you need to do your washing and just catch up with the emails, etc. So try and build that into your timeline if doing a long trip. So emphasizing that again, we rely on our phones so much, so make sure they charge. Try and avoid traveling alone at night. I also said inform necessary people. We'd mentioned that earlier. Wear the necessary clothing, whether you need, especially sampling some animals, you need special protective wear. Long pants is always advisable for field work. Make sure they're ones that don't tear with thorns. Sunscreen is essential. And so hats. We mentioned drinking water earlier on.
No, like already the prices are reduced, so get a good frame starting from 500.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, Prof.
Yes. Sorry. can you repeat what you asked?
No, Prof, that was a mistake. Apologies.
Okay. I'm nearly done, and then I'm hoping you've got lots of questions. Travel rules. I always say, whether you're going on a field trip to a conference or whatever, as mentioned, it's a job. So you're representing your organization. And if you bring them into disrepute, it can have implications. And so you need to be professional, especially in the way you dressed. Some rural areas, perhaps they don't like women without hardly any clothing on, or some countries, they don't like women without lungs or covered up. You've got to take into account other people's cultures. But if you bring your university into disrepute, the way you speak to people, swearing's a no-no. I have something on my computer that says respond rather than react. So whatever situation you are, don't react, try and respond, because people don't expect you to respond, they expect you to react. And the rules and regulations of driving on roads vary, sometimes between provinces, between countries. Crossing borders is often a long, tedious thing. Try and be professional, smile and wave. That way you just avoid being confrontational, and it speeds up things. And one student just put this together for me, what they thought was important. I think we've covered most of it. Yeah, does your AutoCard cover your tolls, or how are you going to pay for parking fees? Which ones have I missed out? I think I've covered most of this elsewhere. So just, yeah, quick summary. When it comes to data collection, it really depends what kind of data you're collecting. A lot of our guys have to do ecological data, where they're writing down either on data sheets. Definitely do your data sheet long in advance, so your data is collected methodically and in the same way. These days, many people use an app, but whatever equipment you're using, is it battery operated? Do you have spares? And we mentioned clothing earlier on. Often for forest work, overalls and gumboots are really good, especially in summer. Obviously, waders are useful for aquatic work in dams and rivers. Do you need backpacks? Do all the group have backpacks? And then if you're doing river or dam work, can the people who are with you swim? We've had students who don't know how to swim volunteer to help with river and dam work. Then they become a liability. Are you going out on boats? Are people aware of the boat safety? Yeah, so you need to think through all these. Do you need to take a skipper's license before hiring boats, etc.? Or are you taking the university boat? I mentioned this earlier. Do you have 4x4 training if you're going to be driving in mud or off-road? Just because there's a road there and there are big rocks doesn't mean you can just drive over it. Often you have to stop and move rocks so that you don't damage the underneath of the vehicle. It's always good to have extra plastic bags of different sizes, Ziplocs, permanent marker pens, etc. But yeah, I think that comes with practice. You learn what you didn't take enough of, cable ties, etc. And then quite a lot of our students do work where they do questionnaires and they're working with humans. They're having to stop and ask them. We only allowed to interview people who are over 18 years old, and people have to give us their consent. So we have a consent form. And so this particular student who shared this slide with me, he's done both ecological and questionnaire data collection. And he said the biggest thing is time. When you're meeting with people, sometimes they're on Africa time, you need to follow the cultural things of greeting and speaking with them, and then they are willing to chat to you. Some of them are very anti-university people because of previous experience of speaking to students who were either rude or took data and then, according to them, interpreted it incorrectly. So this might mean an introduction day. It might mean that you've got to fit in when they're available. Maybe they're going to work. Yeah. So again, the human element is important in that kind of data collection. And then we're in a digital age, and many of you love tech. So you often are using tools, apps, and cyber trackers, one of the ones that you can use to collect data. But does the app work if you're offline? Is there going to be cell phone coverage in that area? And the golden rule, always take data sheets with just as backup, even if you think you're the tech expert. And like for questionnaires, have you printed the version? You don't want to have a data gap just because you can't access your online app. It's cost you so much to get there. And then it's something that I really harp on my students. Backup, backup, backup data. Sometimes laptops get stolen. Sometimes your phone gets stolen. Are you sure that your data, hard copies, don't get lost before you input them? How can you keep them safe? Take photographs of them, etc. Those are all issues with data, because you've spent all this money and time, you don't want to lose it. We once had a student who was moving office, and the cleaner thought that their hard copies were for throwing away. Well, he spent days on the local rubbish dump and never got them all, and ended up not finishing. It really impacted him most negatively. So again, this was one of my postgrads. I said, what advice would you have? And he said, for people starting field work, be ready when things don't go to plan. So I've emphasized plan, 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 but often things don't go to plan. The weather can change. People who said they would help won't help. Vehicles break down. Try and be patient and calm. Improvise. Enjoy the challenge. You can pat yourself on the back if you overcome it. Work as a team. Make everyone be on the same page about what your goals are, what equipment you're using. Ask their opinions, make group decisions. If it's just you often make the rest of the team grumpy and they're not so keen to help you. Ask questions of each other. That way you'll, and deal with issues so that there's not bad feeling amongst you. And then he said, always double check your data in the field. Human error happens. but good habits prevent it. Be risk averse, but dedicated to your objectives. Prioritize data quality and be opportunistic. And then try and keep labeling simple. You often suddenly catch a whole heap of whatever species when you've been trying for ages and ages. And if you've got a long data sheet, often if it's catching and releasing, you don't want to keep animals in a bag or a box for very long in terms of ethics. And something that some people forget about is, although we ecologists and environmentalists, sometimes we actually disperse alien invasives. If you more botanical or ecological project and you're collecting plants, make sure that your plant press is inside a container so any seeds aren't dispersed. Often a bag's not good because sometimes those tear. So plastic containers are often a good way, and that also keeps it dry if there's rain, etc. Sometimes we carry these seeds on our boots or shoes, tires, and if you're working on boats between sites, you don't want to spread horrible invasive weeds, so wash them down, etc. So it's just a different thing. Then post field trip, and I promise I'm near the end. Yeah, just let your supervisor know if you're back from a long trip. If you've had a long drive, it's really good to know that you're safely back. Store your specimens correctly so they don't get lost. Otherwise, why have you bothered to spend all this money and time? And make sure they're well labeled, especially if you're putting them into freezers so that people know that it's your specimens and that each specimen, where, when, and the name, etc., are on those specimens so that a technician doesn't come and do clean out of the freezer and throw them away. Return equipment clean and in working order. If that's how you got it, then it's essential. It seems silly, but some people forget to wash the research vehicle really well and get all the dust out and make it as how they would like to have received it. Report vehicle issues. If there's a funny noise, maybe it needs to go in for service. Then in some areas where you go, there's sometimes grass in the middle monarchy, and grass collects under the radiator. It's a fire hazard. And so on your field trip, try and check for that, but very especially when you return as well, so that the next person doesn't inherit a vehicle that could catch alight at any moment. And then very importantly, send thank you letters or emails and updates to your landowners or stakeholders and all those who assisted. Especially if you have to return, people remember you for thanking them. And then I mentioned this in the beginning, you have to collate all the receipts and costs and your fuel slips. And again, going back to the data, save it again, back it up, share it with your supervisor so that there's extra backup. And then lastly, as a supervisor, fieldwork is quite stressful to supervise. You've got to find the money first for students to go out there. You've got to make sure that they do successful data collection and they're not just wasting time and effort. Then our big cost is vehicles and keeping them in running order, that they're available. Yeah. Equipment is also a big hassle because people just misuse equipment. They forget that there are others that need to use it. Some students forget to back up data. And then the safety of our students when they're out in the field or on the roads, I think for most supervisors is a worry, because it's like, as I mentioned in the beginning, having surrogate children. So if you travel away to university, you usually let your parents know or your guardians know where you are and that you're safely there. As supervisors also like to know it. And then last of all, I just want to thank all the postgrads and my colleagues who've shared insights. And I know I've covered a huge amount in this, and I haven't given you much chance to answer anything, but if we could have it more as a workshop now, where if there are particular slides you want me to go back to, then please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. I do see a question in the chat. It reads, Dear Prof, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I want to ask, what would a person do if faced with a natural disaster or major issue while on site?
Okay, that does happen. We've had students with the floods in KZN, and they were in a rural area doing field work, and they couldn't cross rivers, etc. It depends on the situation. We've had other students where there've been felt fires come through and big winds, to know how to do a back burn around and who to contact.
Are you listening?
About that. So it really depends on the situation. But chat with the other postgrads and with your supervisor what things have happened in the past. Sometimes we have safety workshops within our discipline where we get people to, the guy who services our vehicles gives 4x4 training and other. How would you deal with like getting across rivers, tie ropes around you, etc. Do you have rope in the vehicle, etc. But be prepared for it, and especially with climate change, I think we're getting more and more of this atypical type of weather where we get flash floods, etc. So especially if you're doing field work in rivers and there's no rain where you are, be prepared that there might have been a huge thunderstorm upstream and suddenly you have a 2-meter wall of water coming downstream. How are you going to deal with that? I don't know, have I answered your question a little bit?
Ariam, please indicate that with a thumbs up if your question has been answered. Okay, I do see a thumbs up there, Prof. And then another question from Len Swade. Thank you, Prof, for the insightful presentation. How far in advance should students begin planning their fieldwork, particularly when permissions, ethics, approval, and travel arrangements are involved?
Yeah, it depends on the university and which province you're going to work in. Because some provinces won't give you the permits until you've got the ethics permission. So as soon as you register, I would start with all your ethics. Even if your field work is 6 months in advance, try and get all your ethics permission as early as possible. Excuse me. But I applied for renewal of some of our KZN wildlife permits 3 months ago, and we still haven't received those. I had to chase up yesterday. So often what we're finding, posts haven't been filled and they need different people to give input on a particular permit before permission is granted. And so you might have to actually go in person to the particular place and ask, who do you need to speak to chase up a permit, or find what are the issues why they don't want to give you a permit. Yeah. Sometimes you need your supervisor's intervention. So often I will submit a permit on behalf of a student because I know that the people know me, and when they see an email from me, they might look at it more than a student who kind of just goes into their email box. And yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Lensford, please indicate there with a thumbs up if your question has been answered. Okay, Prof, I do see a thumbs up there. I don't see any further questions in the chat and no hands are raised. Maybe while we wait for participants to gather the question, I would just like to do a few reminders. I would just like to remind the participants about the session tomorrow at 10 to 12 titled Designing Controlled Experiments with Appropriate Randomization, Intervention and Replication. No questions as yet, Prof.
So what I'd like to find out at UJ, do you have similar protocols to our university where you have to book vehicles either through your supervisor or technician, and do you fill in field trip forms? Do you have to sign documents for the rules of vehicle use? I was just interested whether you have that.
Yes, Prof. The protocol is the same.
So is it similar to what we've got?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, because I was so worried that I was telling you about things that maybe didn't apply at your university, but I think they're very important, not only for your safety, but also if there are repercussions if things go wrong.
Yeah.
Have any of you been on a field trip where you've had things go wrong? And do you want to share that with the group? I mentioned a few during the talk. Yeah, but I think in our South African situation is quite unique, and safety is a big issue, not only on roads, but wherever you're collecting data.
The mics have been able, so the participants can raise their hand and then unmute and answer the question.
I also wasn't sure if I was speaking to people who had done many years of field work, or it was mainly people who were just beginning field work. So if you're someone who's done lots of field work, maybe what I've put together bored you very much. But for those of you just starting fieldwork, I hope I've provided some insight and some things to help you. I saw a question came up.
Yeah. Is there a protocol for damaged equipment if the equipment is expensive?
The equipment might be insured, so then you would need to chat with your supervisor to find out if you can claim on insurance. But your supervisor would know, perhaps have to get quotes on, or send you to go and get quotes how it can be fixed. And because most of our universities, if it's expensive equipment, is costly to repair, then they want quotes before they allow your supervisor to pay. And And are there going to be big delays with that equipment? And say you're doing monthly field work, do you need to borrow other field equipment? Can you learn it maybe from even another university, if in the interim, so that you can still get your data? Because the timelines for doing masters and PhD are so tight, and especially if you're doing seasonal work or monthly work, where if you miss out on 1 month, then it's a huge hole in your data. And does that mean that you're going to have to extend your master's or PhD? Yeah. So the thing, we've got an electroshocker that we use for sampling in rivers for fish. Well, when I see students bring it back broken, I just want to cry, because it's something that you can look after, and just make sure you pack it very carefully. So some of the things that have got glass, you need to be very careful how you pack it when taking it on field trips, especially on rural dirt roads that aren't maintained very well. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Alex. Please indicate there with a thumbs up if your question has been answered. Thank you, Prof. I don't see any further questions, Prof, and no hands are raised. Maybe we give this participants a few seconds, then I'll quickly do reminders. I would like to remind our participants to register on RCDMS, as this is our one-step platform where students can access all our workshops, including recordings of past sessions. You can also book a free writing consultation with our writing consultants and generate your certificate of attendance once you have registered and attended the session by RCDMS. Should you experience any issues with RCDMS, kindly email the RCD inquiries email, which will be put in the chat. And then also that we will be hosting the 2026 UJ Postgraduate and Postdoctoral Research Conference on 16 October this year for PhDs, Masters and Honours students. In addition, we will be hosting the 2027 International Postgraduate and Postdoctoral Research Conference next year at Sun City, Northwest. Further communication regarding this conference will be shared with students, so please be on the lookout for that. Prof, I don't see any further questions. With your permission, can we move to closing?
Yes, and just thank you all for giving of your time, and all the best in your studies. I'm always chuffed when students are doing postgrad, so well done, and keep
Thank you.
at it. And one of the big things that a lot of students battle with now is anxiety. And for field trips, if you've done your preparation, then you don't need to be so anxious about it. Okay, so good luck and best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, and thank you for all the valuable insights that you have shared with us. Also, thank you to all the participants that have been with us in this workshop. With your permission, Prof, can I stop the recording and end the session, or is there something you would like to add?
No, thank you. Best wishes. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Prof. I will be stopping the recording now. Have a great day further. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.